Hello, friends from St. Michael, Resurrection, and St. Anne parishes, and welcome to this week's Quick Things, which is a conversation, which is always better than having just to listen to me. One thing, and our conversation kind of ties in with something I talked about last week when I talked about our mission of sharing faith, and I did that in the context of encouraging people to consider being catechists or assistants in our faith formation and forming young disciples program, and saying that that was one of the most important ways in which we share our faith. Well, I was waiting for somebody to come beating down my door and saying, well, Father Tom, we also share our faith in our Catholic school system. And they would have been right in correcting me on that, adding, clarifying that. So we're gonna correct that error from last week this week by talking to Caleb Feit, who is the new principal of Newman St. Anne School. And I wanted, before I get into that conversation, I just want all of us to know that whether we are at St. Anne or St. Michael or Resurrection or any of the other parishes in the Wausau area, we have an investment. We are part of Newman Catholic Schools and Newman St. Anne Schools. So for example, most of the kids who go to our school, Newman St. Anne, are from St. Michael's and Resurrection and St. Anne's and the other parishes. So that's the wonder really of our shared system of Catholic schools, is that we don't have this parochial nature. We can see the church in a more expansive way as it lives out in our school system. So I welcome Caleb, realizing that this is probably the first of a couple conversations we'll need to have. Maybe after we get started a little bit in the year, we'll talk to Jeff Goulon, the president of Newman Catholic Schools, just to see kind of a state of the system summary where we're at with enrollment and things like that in Newman Catholic Schools. And then also we should do a conversation with Sarah Welch, who is the director of the Newman Early Childhood Center at St. Michael's. I think that's a program that doesn't get very much attention, but which is an excellent program and something we need to talk about. So those are upcoming conversations. Caleb, first of all, welcome to Quick Things, but more importantly, welcome to Newman St. Anne Elementary School.
Thank you so much. I'm extremely excited to be here. And this is such a joy and gift. I'll be real honest. This has just been a blast to come in and spend my summer prepping for the school year.
Yeah, so you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into what's all involved in preparing for the start of school. This will come out on Wednesday. School starts on Thursday.
Yes.
So we probably should be doing this on Wednesday and just see what kind of state of chaos is unfolding. But tell us a little bit. No chaos.
We're good. No chaos. We've got this. This is my 18th year in education. So I started as a public school special ed teacher back 18 years ago, and actually here in the Wausau School District, spent 8 years as a self-contained special ed teacher. Absolutely adored it. Loved working with the kids, loved being in the buildings. And then my wife and I moved over to the Fox Valley, where I continued teaching for 2 years. And that was again in special ed, and spent my time in elementary schools. I went back to school to get my administrative degrees, and I say degrees because I've got a couple of licenses and I like school, so that's why. But I became a director.
So you like learning too.
I love learning. I have more degrees than I like to admit. But I went back and got my director's license and my principal license, and I became a director of special ed in Omro. And then for the last 5 years, I was the director of student services in Stevens Point. And I loved every minute of that. I spent a lot of time working with schools, working with specific students, but I missed being in a building specifically and really that direct impact with students. And so I took the leap, and my family lives here. So we live actually really close. And if you see me cruising around on my orange bike, that's something new. I've been commuting for 5 years. And so the idea of being able to ride to my bike to work most days, it's really a blessing. But really, it's really nice to be back in a building where I get to have direct impact with staff and students on an everyday basis. Sure. And so my family, I have a wife, Cassandra, and I got 2 children. Oscar, who's a first grader, will be joining our St. Anne's family here. And I have a 3-year-old daughter, Olive, who is at a childcare just up the road from us. but we're really excited to be a part of the family. And that's been really the general theme that I've felt. I've met every staff member within this building, and it's just been welcoming. They're lovely. They're excited to be here. And it's been really an easy transition for me, and quite honestly, an exciting one as well. So
yeah, I think that you mentioned that about the faculty. I think, Hill, one of the things I've been impressed with over the years, my relatively short time being here, and that was true when I was at Pacelli Catholic Schools in Stevens Point, is just how eager and engaged the teachers are in what they're about, which I guess, that's what they're doing. You'd hope that were the case, but it really is an important, I mean, to see that is really impressive and something I, as a pastor of Newman Catholic Schools, appreciate. Tell us about where you grew up and stuff like that.
So I grew up in, it's all right. I grew up in Rice Lake, Wisconsin, which is a couple hours north of here, and loved it. Small town, really great for a family that I have. I've got 2 older brothers and a younger sister, and being in a small community, it was really nice. But I moved to Oshkosh for my undergraduate degree, and kind of since then have been trying to find a place to set roots down. And my wife is from Wausau originally, so coming back to Wausau was an easy space because we have relatives and family here in town, and that made it really nice. Because when we moved over to the Valley, I moved really close to my family because my family moved later on in life. And so when we place our families in different locations, it has always been important for Cassandra and I to have the family present, and that larger family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, to be a part of our kids growing up. And that's why we're back here. And it's really lovely to have that. My in-laws live a couple of blocks away from me, which is really lovely too. So they're 1-minute drive. We've timed it out.
Sure. You've talked a little bit about your background. You've been in the Stevens Point School District for several years. What prompted you when you saw this notice for this position? And what prompted you to apply for that?
I wanted to be back in schools, and I wanted to be back in a smaller school that I'd have some impact. But the last year has been a really interesting year for me. And between falling off my roof and Father Tom, you and I have talked about this a couple of times, it just kind of dawned on me that I needed to be able to use what I have gotten as gifts, which is really that impact to students, to teach faculty and staff, and to be an advocate for families. I had an opportunity here with a principalship. And as a director of student services, I got to do it at a global level, but it wasn't it's hard when you're doing it at such a large scale. And I wanted to be back by kids. I really had a desire to really be driven here. And then I've always been drawn back to the church. And I've always found myself coming back to the church and finding some peace in that space. And so it kind of worked really well for both the faith side of it and then my education side of it. And so to blend them together has been kind of a really fun journey this summer. And that's what drew me to that posting. And I'll be honest with you, when I started talking to people at the interview process, it really became a family like that quick. Well, and that's something really unique.
You interviewed with some of the best people in Newman Catholic School. And certainly 2 of our best teachers, Linda Wang and Bile, were part of that. So and April was part of that too, if I recall.
Yes. Autumn was, and then we also had a family member too. So, but it was just it was a fun interview, which I know sounds really weird to say out loud, but it was a really enjoyable time spent with the staff, but also just getting to know everyone, and became just really a conversation piece.
Right. And I think that was appreciated by that group. So you're here, August, you began officially July 1. How does a new person get established in a new school? You haven't been you've never been in the building before you had that interview back in May. How do you get established and be ready for school to start tomorrow?
It really does start back in July. And I'm going to give a shout out to the 3 people that really get the building structure. You got Tim, you got David, and you got Bill. And I know my last communication out, I finally figured out Bill's schedule. So I need to apologize and give a shout out to him.
Those
But
are
the
the
three of,
parish, those are the
yeah,
parish maintenance people. And I will, since you
yeah,
mentioned David Lowe, we have
yeah,
the most clean,
yes,
shiny hallway in the entire world in that school
yes.
due
And
to
it goes
David's work.
everywhere. It is, you could ice skate on it. It looks like glass. But the three of them really are a cornerstone of getting the building itself cleaned and then ready for students. They help move desks around, they help get teachers established. And so that's the first step, is getting the building itself ready. The building and grounds, they clean the building, they get everything set so that when staff come back, they're ready to come back and recreate the environment for students. And then from there, it's going in and meeting staff. And so I spent my first month sitting down with staff to get to know them and just having a sit down conversation and creating spaces where we get to know each other, because I get to see what they teach, but I want to know who they are, because once you get to the hustle and bustle of kids, you lose that. So I spent the first month getting to know staff and inviting families in, and I've had the fortunate ability to really meet some fabulous staff, and I'm excited for next Tuesday when I get to meet them and they come back. But it's just kind of settling in, and as you know, you came in my office like 2 weeks into it, and I made the office my own, and that's really key too. And I say that not as a celebration, but really as getting myself around what I need to be successful. And
Yeah.
so I reestablished it, and I found chalkboards in my office, which has been lovely, and kids have really enjoyed it.
Kids will wonder what chalkboards are. We don't see
I
chalkboards.
know.
Although I think
There's
a
a
lot of our,
chalkboard in every classroom
there
though,
is,
Father Tom.
yeah,
Like, we have
yeah.
such a cool school, but I had chalkboards in my office. So, but then
When you
it's
talk
getting, oh, go ahead.
when you talk about meeting with
Yeah,
the faculty,
yeah,
they're coming in, you're brand new to them, and they're a little,
yeah,
they've had Terry Vyshinsky, who was a great principal, who
yep,
they all regretted, her retirement. And
yeah.
so you're coming in, the new guy, the new person. Was there a common theme, like when you would say, do you have any questions for me? Was there a common idea that they wanted to ask you in terms of
Yeah,
how
I
you
think
do your job?
they really wanted to ask, well, what changes are you going to make? And what I can honestly tell you, the history and the richness of St. Anne's isn't changing. What I did is I just tried to look at some functionalities. And so that was kind of the common theme, is that everybody wants to know, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to change? And I'm not changing much. I really didn't come in and do much change. I created some different structures and some schedules, but what happens day to day with our staff and our students, that doesn't need to be changed. It is vibrant, it's blossoming, and what they do in their classrooms, I'm excited to just observe and enrich. And so that was a common theme, because again, new, like you said, the new guy coming in, like that's their worry, like how do you operate, and you treat that. And my biggest piece here is that they're all professionals, and so we just talk to them as such, and they're humans, and so they have families and they've got kids and they've got stories to tell, and you honor and you remember that, and that's how you come in. And my son has been running around when they've been around, and they get to see, like, I'm human. Like I have kids and I've got people around, and that's what's really, really fun. And so you build those connections and those relationships so that when we come up into challenging times throughout the school year, we work together as a unit rather than principal versus teacher. We don't do that. We really want to be in this cohesive space.
Mhm. Caleb mentioned kind of claiming his office and making it
Yeah.
his space. I accused him of not getting a building permit because it seemed that he had expanded his office,
Yeah.
but really rearranging things made it complete. It was just like a completely different room
Yeah.
and a lot bigger, it seems to me. But
Yes. Yep.
it shows what you can do with a little interior redesign. So you got the
Yeah.
building cleaned up, ready to go. You
Yep.
got teachers. Do you have a full staff of teachers?
I do. As of today, I am fully staffed in our teaching staff and our educational staff. We are still in the need for an after-school teacher. So I'm working in that space. So I'm hoping to, I have faith that it's going to come together. But that's what I'm looking for right now. And that just kind of came up recently. So hopefully as the word gets out, I'll be able to find an after school teacher for students, because I know families need that help. And that, but I have faith, because I literally just hired my EA this morning, and we've been waiting on that.
EA is
so an educational assistant for students. Yeah. So acronyms in the teaching world is crazy.
Yeah. Oh, when we did that interview with you, Caleb, you were throwing out acronyms all over the place. I said to the teachers afterwards, I said, did you know what all those things were? And they said, well, most of them.
Yeah. So there used to be a binder for being a director. There was a binder of acronyms in the world of special ed, because it gets really crazy. So I sometimes forget that when I get into a mode of storytelling.
Well, and of course, the church is notorious for strange names and things.
So it's a good pairing. See, look at.
So having a full staff, you're better off than we were a year ago. We didn't have a first grade teacher when we began.
Yeah.
And I know there's a couple vacancies yet at other schools in the system. So hope that those folks stay in place for the next few weeks or as we get started.
They're so much fun to have staff back. And I think that's the next stage of this is, over the last couple of weeks, staff have been in getting their rooms ready. And so it's been really exciting to have that life. So you get to walk down the hall and staff are in their rooms and they're putting it together and they're rearranging, and you can see the new ideas and the new bulletin boards. And so it's really fun to see the hallways are clean, but the rooms were still kind of, hibernating.
Right.
But now it's, we're coming to life, and there's bulletin boards and teachers have the desks arranged. And that's been really fun to watch, because they're coming in and there's a buzz around. And with the excitement of back to school night, or the backpack night as it's known, that's exciting to see. And teachers are excited to see kids. Parents are excited to come and see the buildings. And
what happens at backpack night?
So this year we did a little bit different, and I know that is kind of I didn't send out class lists with the mailings, because that's the other piece. So like early August, we send out mailings, and we sent out information that they needed, but there's a lot of information that they get next Tuesday. But teachers then, instead of getting the list, they've sent out information and introduced themselves individually. And so they start to form the relationship that way. So when they come in on Tuesday night, it's going to be kind of like a bingo game. So they're going to get a card, and they're scavenger hunt around the building, so that they get to meet the new people, but also see the building differently versus just dropping a backpack off and leaving. We want them to go around. So they'll come on in, they'll go to their classroom, they'll see where their desk is, they'll meet the teacher face to face if they don't already know who they are. And then they're going to be able to come and meet me, the administrative assistant, check out the gym, check out the specialist. We also have home and school going to be here that night. We've got Girl Scouts going to be coming that night. So it's really about coming together and getting all of that information completed. But it really is settling yourself down, getting that feeling of back to school, and then 2 days later, day one starts.
Well, and I would have to think that having a new principal will increase a participation a bit this year.
Yeah, I hope. And it's funny you say that, because those that can't make it have been like, hey, can we come in and visit? Absolutely, come on in.
But after Tuesday, you can't come before.
No, come on in and meet and talk and sit down with me. And they've really appreciated that. And I really have honored the requests that have come in to say, hey, can we just sit down and we have questions? Absolutely. Or they'll call. And that's what's important.
Well, I don't want to keep you. You have other things to do, but
it's okay.
What would be a few things that happen in those last days or hours before students arrive that most of us would just be completely oblivious to? Because I have to just think there are so many details that have to be addressed.
Honestly, it's getting, for us, it's making sure that we have all the students where they need to go, finalizing those lists, making sure that our health room is set. And it's really just orderly. But what I always laugh is, no matter how organized we can be, day one's going to happen whether we're ready or not. And so it really is just making sure teachers are feeling really comfortable. And so those last those next 3 days, next week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, is really about coming together as a system, coming together as a staff, but allowing teachers time to be ready for that first day and giving them that space to settle themselves into what that first day is going to be. And I think that's the unique piece. There's a lot of trainings that go on those first 3 days. I think people sometimes don't realize that because we have in-service with staff, but that comes with quite a bit of meetings. And so the amount of time staff spend in their classrooms before the first day of school, I think that's the misunderstood space, because we have teachers in here for days upon days before we even come back for in-service. And the dedication that they do for that, I think, is something that isn't always seen. And so that background stuff between the work with the custodial staff, the work with administration, and then the teachers having the time within their space that they're taking away from their families throughout the summer, I think that's something that I think we just need to celebrate. Like, they really are passionate and dedicated to the students and to the families. And so although those first 3 days we hear in service, what we don't always see is August and July when they are coming in. And so we always say, like, hey, we shouldn't always, come on in, it's gonna be messy, but come and see teachers. There's always somebody around.
Well, I mean, that's a good point that you mentioned, that we just kind of take that for granted, that those teachers are there that first day and everything's ready to go. Well, there's been stuff going on for weeks to make that possible. So excellent point to bring up. So Caleb, I hope it is a great beginning for you. I hope it's a great year for Newman St. Anne School and all of our different Catholic schools. You mentioned people might see you around town on your orange bike. You'll also have on his back his yellow bag. So that would be another
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm the man with the yellow bag around, and it's all right. So
good. I want to conclude with a prayer.
Sounds good.
For teachers and students, but I think, I was going to mention, so you have behind you an image of St. John Henry Newman.
Yes.
Who, I did a little article for the Newman Alumni Magazine, I think is what it's for. about Newman. I was supposed to write about his canonization, and the story of his canonization really isn't that interesting. So it turned out to be more about him. Well, I think one of the things that we take for granted, so he was a man of the university, a man of great intellect, but ultimately he was someone who was constantly learning and wanted to gain a deeper understanding of the church, of scripture, of his relationship to God, to the people of God. And so that's, I think, a key component of why Newman is a good patron for our system. So I want to conclude with this prayer for teachers and students, of whom we all in some way are. Lord Jesus, you are the teacher of teachers. Before you, we are all learners. As we delve into life's mysteries each day, each day carries lessons for us. Enlighten our minds, open our hearts. Give the blessing of your presence to our students and teachers, and the will to work together with commitment to the glory of God and the good of all the world. Amen. Caleb, thank you very much. Blessings on the new year.
Thank you so much.